Boring. Oh, this is okay. Oh, shit. Oh, yeah. This is what we're looking for. This is what we're looking at. What's up, guys? Tristan here with another video. This one's coming out a little bit later, but we're going to be doing the UFC 254 predictions. Khabib, Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje. I'm super excited for these fights. There's actually only, and you'll see from the intro, I'm only really interested in 4 different fights here. And those are the only ones I'm going to talk about. I don't like talking about fights where I don't know the fighters very well. I don't like to just do research on people that I'm not as interested in. All the fights that I'm going to be talking about are people that I've watched, I'm interested in, and I feel like I can give a good prediction on the fights and talk about them in a way where I'm not just reading off something there. I mean, I have my notes right here. I still have a general understanding of who these fighters are, who they fought before, what their fight styles are, and I think that's going to give me a good understanding of these fights and how they might go. So, the first fight we have on the card that I will be talking about is Islam Makhachev versus Rafael dos Anjos. So a lot of you will probably know of Rafael dos Anjos. He's a veteran in the sport. He was the UFC lightweight champion before he lost to Eddie Alvarez. And he hasn't retained the title or reclaimed the title since then. He's kind of been on like a negative run a little bit. So, and someone you might not have heard of is Islam Makhachev. But if you are into watching a lot of the American Kickboxing Academy's training videos, I know they have the one channel, it's like San Francisco Bay or something like that, where they have Daniel Cormier, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and this is where Islam Makhachev trains. It's a very strong gym. They've had Daniel Cormier, who's a multiple weight division champion. They have Khabib, who is 28-0 and currently fighting Justin Gaethje for the lightweight title. He's retaining his title once again, defending it. So Islam is 18-1. Rafael dos Anjos is 29-13. And this is definitely Islam's very first big test. He is unbelievably good wrestling. He even received a gold medal at the Combat Sambo World Championships in 2016, and he's had a notable KO against Gleison Tibau, who is definitely not a very well-known fighter, but some of you might have heard of him. Definitely a good fighter. And then we have Rafael dos Anjos. The last 2 fights were losses against Michael Chiesa and Leon Edwards. Those aren't anything to scoff at. I mean, Michael Chiesa and Leon Edwards are definitely very, very good fighters. Both big contenders in the welterweight division. RDA is one of those like journeyman fighters that are kind of on like their way out and are stepping stones often for up-and-coming fighters. Rafael dos Anjos is one of those fighters who definitely peaked and then stopped evolving from there. If you've watched his fights after, he doesn't really evolve as a fighter. He's still the same fighter that he fought. That's when he fought Nate Diaz, Anthony Pettis. Those are people that he convincingly beat. But then when he starts fighting guys like Tony Ferguson, Eddie Alvarez, he kind of falls short. Or like Khabib Nurmagomedov, Colby Covington. These are all guys that he's lost to. Big pressure fighters like that. And I think Islam is going to come out with this same sort of game plan as those guys had in their game plans. Is just wear him down, have a steady pace, keep grappling, keep punching, keep throwing strikes. And I think he's going to have the same problem here. And he's going to get gassed out. He's going to get taken down a lot. It's not like RDA has like a super bad gas tank. It's just that he kind of falls off towards the end. He doesn't have the same power. He doesn't have the same tenacity for stopping takedowns, for giving back big strikes. You saw this in the Tony Ferguson fight versus him. Tony was just outlanding him and outstriking him, outmaneuvering him. He was just throwing all sorts of different stuff, spinning back elbows and long punches, things like that, long kicks. The only thing I see going for RDA is that Islam Makhachev, his one of his main coaches died. and passed away, who was Khabib's father. And you never know, and I think a lot of people from Dagestan are very family oriented, and something like this might actually hurt them a lot. It could either be a distraction for them, something that just seems off for them, and he might have an off night. You never know about this. I'm gonna talk a bit more about this in the Khabib fight in my predictions, but it could also set a fire under his ass. Maybe he's even more motivated to make Khabib's father proud. But either way, we're gonna see on Saturday. I'm gonna give the third round unanimous decision win for Islam Makhachev. Third fight is Alexander Volkov versus Walt Harris. Walt Harris is 13-8. He just lost to Alistair Overeem via TKO. And then there's Alexander Volkov, who is 31-8, definitely a big veteran. Walt Harris is a former basketball player in college, and he turned to fighting in 2010. I'm not going to go too much into this fight because what we're seeing here is a very experienced fighter with a decent record versus a less experienced fighter with not the best record. Plus, this isn't one of the big fights that interests me a lot. I just know both fighters and have seen them both fighting. Volkov has a height and reach advantage, striking background in karate, and again, way more experience. He beat Fabricio Verdun via KO. He beat Roy Nelson, Stefan Struve, and most notable victory of Harris's career is Alexei Olenek, who's I think almost like he's in his like mid 40s with like over 70 fights in MMA, which is insane. But nonetheless, I'm going to give the pick to Volkov. I think he's going to systematically pick apart Walt Harris. He kind of has that very patient, pick you apart from the outside sort of style. And I could see Harris coming in and getting clipped. Volkov's definitely a strong counterpuncher. But I still think it's going to be a unanimous decision victory for Alexander Volkov. The next fight, so this is the co-main event for UFC 254, Robert Whittaker versus Jared Cannonier, which is a excellent fight. So this is one of those fights where it's like whoever wins is going to be taking on Israel Adesanya. And we already knew how that went between Robert Whittaker and Israel, but let's get into this one. So 21-5 record for Robert Whittaker and 13-4 for Jared Cannonier. Rob is 1 inch taller. Jared is 1 inch shorter, but has a 4-inch reach advantage. So that dude is literally to kill a gorilla. I mean, he's got those orangutan looking hands, or arms. He's got very long reach. So let's look at Jared first. He actually fought at heavyweight and was super extra thick. Like, he doesn't even look like the same person, but definitely didn't have the height or reach to really be competitive in that division. You got to be super tall, have super long reach to really do well, unless you're like a Roy Nelson or Roy Nelson pretty much. I don't know any other smaller sort of physical attribute guys in that division that do well. He actually fought in Alaska and won 7 straight in the heavyweight division before joining the UFC, and went 1-1 in the heavyweight division. I tried to look, I didn't look too deep, but I tried to look why Jared was in Alaska in the first place. I don't know why he was doing that. He's from like the Midwest, I believe. He's nowhere near from Alaska, but for some reason he was fighting in the Alaska Fighting League or whatever it's called. And then after going 1-1 in the UFC in the heavyweight division, he then moved down to light heavyweight, lost a few to Jan Blachowicz and Dominic Reyes. He lost a few and won a few. And then he finally moved to heavyweight, where it looks like he's been doing great, and he hasn't lost since. So he's currently 3-0 in middleweight, beating the likes of David Branch, Anderson Silva, and Jack Hermanson. Definitely looking more like a top contender in that division, gotta say. He's got the shreds. He's definitely looking like a top contender in the middleweight division, and he looks shredded. I mean, he actually looks like a really decent dude. He's got the abs going and everything. So I definitely like that in terms of like a fan perspective. I mean, when a dude's ultra shredded and he looks real good, his shoulders are striated and cut up, like he looks good. And the thing about moving down from those weight classes is like you retain a lot of that power. And that's something you'll see in a lot of his fights is he chops guys down with leg kicks. If you saw the Anderson Silva fight, he was able to beat Anderson Silva via the leg kicks. He knocked out Jack Hermanson with that uppercut as Jack Hermanson was coming in. Now, let's go on to Robert Whittaker. So, we've got a worn out Robert Whittaker. He's at a loss. Last few fights have been pretty rocky. He lost very convincingly against Israel Adesanya. And then he had the 2 Yoel Romero fights, which were absolute wars, which will take a toll on absolutely anyone. I mean, getting hit that many times is very difficult for any person. And if you get hit by a dude like Yoel Romero, you're going to get hurt. And he got hurt in that fight. And those went to the bitter end. Those dudes were exhausted by the end of those fights. And rightly so. I mean, they were throwing... Those are like fight of the year type fights, and that was for both of them. And honestly, it could have been arguable that Yoel Romero won one of those fights, or at least a draw. Yeah, it's just crazy. I almost wish we could see another one of those fights, but I honestly don't want to see either of those dudes go through another war like that since we've already been given so much. Robert Whittaker has also dabbled in different weight classes. He was a welterweight contender at the time before he lost to Stephen Thompson. He won one more fight in welterweight before moving up to middleweight. Since then, he's had an undefeated record other than his loss to Israel Adesanya. I think what we're going to see between these two fighters, Jared Cannonier and Robert Whittaker, it's a straight up technical fight, but I could also see it going out to be a crazy war. And I would really like to see a big fight between these dudes. I think they're both great guys, and they need a bit more of that fan attention if they haven't already gotten it. Like I said, Jared has some crazy power, and he's TKO'd all 3 of his last opponents with a variety of different ways, with the punches and the kicks, leg kicks. He has great leg kicks. He's a great counterpuncher. He does get hit a lot, but so does Robert Whittaker. They're not like super evasive like Israel Adesanya. They do get hit. They do trade punches. Robert has a more wide range of attacks with all his different kicks. You'll definitely see punches followed by a kick over the top, question mark kicks, oblique kicks, side kicks. Robert has to make sure not to get hit too much because it really could be lights out if he does start to get hit too much. Because Jared does have some really good power, and he has to make sure that he checks some kicks from Jared Cannonier, because we definitely know that he's going to be throwing out a lot of leg kicks. I'm gonna say a 3rd round TKO for Jared. I really like that dude. I think he's gonna go in the top of the division. I just think Robert Whittaker needs to advance his game. It's kind of like the fall of Rafael dos Anjos. It's like they got to the point where they were because of the style. But if you don't keep evolving that style, then you're not going to retain the title if you don't switch anything up drastically each time. Something that GSP used to say, and his coach, Firas Zahabi, used to say that they only had to do 2 fights of the year to defend his title. And every single time they had a new fight, they would try to install some sort of new technique or new tactic into their fight. So you'd see a new GSP every single time he fought. You can only like master so many techniques in that short amount of time. So he would master a few techniques in between the fights, and the opponent would be caught off guard, and that was his edge, on top of his really, really strong wrestling and a good ground game, or a good striking game. So we definitely need to see something different from Robert Whittaker here. What he's done isn't working as much anymore. I mean, he beat Darren Till, but it wasn't super convincing. It wasn't a super convincing win, and I just think we need to see something different. Or else, if he goes back to fighting Israel Adesanya again, he's just gonna get his shit knocked out again. So we're gonna say 3rd round TKO for Jared, but I could honestly see it going either way, to be honest. And I really, really wish this was a 5-round fight. I really wish it was. The last fight on the card. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje. This could either be one hell of a match or a really shitty snooze fest, because I could see this fight going any 3 ways. One, Khabib could just take Gaethje down and just smash him like he's done every other single person in his fights. We could see Gaethje knock out Khabib. I think that's the least likely of the circumstances. And then the third is we could see an all-out war for 5 rounds. Stuffed takedowns, submission attempts, hard shots, takedowns, knockdowns. I really hope this goes all 5 rounds. I really hope it lives to the hype. I really don't care who wins if that's the case. And I'd just be happy to watch an insane fight between this insane striker and insane grappler. So let's go into the fight and the statistics for each fighter. Khabib is 28-0 versus Justin Gaethje, who is 22-2. His only losses being to Dustin Poirier and Eddie Alvarez. And something to note about Gaethje before we go into this is he's an evolved fighter. When we saw him against Michael Johnson, Dustin Poirier, and Eddie Alvarez, he was just standing bang. He wasn't smart about his approach, and he would just let himself get hit, and he wouldn't choose his shots carefully. But with the coaching of Trevor Whitman, he's able to evolve his game and be able to be a lot more patient, not take as much damage from other fighters, and choose his shots really carefully. If you saw him against the Tony Ferguson fight, this was the most evident he was choosing his shots. And when he chose his shots, he knew he was going to land it, so he really put all of his power into it. And you could see it on Tony's face at the end of the fight that he was just getting absolutely mangled. Both of these fighters started out as wrestlers, but as you've noticed, Gaethje is not going to take anybody down. He's a striker, despite his wrestling background. We can mostly say that Khabib is a much more dangerous wrestler, and that is going to be his main objective of this fight, is to take Gaethje down and ground and pound him. He's done that in every other single fight, unless he wasn't able to take them down. The only other fight I think that he had troubles with that was Gleison Tibau, which he still won. Khabib has 2 gold medals at the men's combat Sambo World Championships. Something I don't think people understand is that Sambo is very similar to MMA, and I just learned this as well, is that the only difference is there's no cage and you can't do certain submissions in Sambo. But what's really weird about Sambo is that you can headbutt, you can soccer kick, you can even do groin strikes. I was watching one of Khabib's Sambo matches and I didn't see any groin strikes. That would be very painful. Just shows how brutal that sport is and why fighters like Khabib and Islam and Fedor Emelianenko are so successful at MMA, because they've had this large background with a sport that's so similar to MMA. Another thing I think people don't know about Khabib is that he has a black belt in judo as well, and it just cements how strong this dude's takedowns and wrestling and grappling really is. Justin Gaethje similarly started training wrestling very early, just as early as Khabib, I believe, at the age of 4. He wrestled all through high school, college, where he was an NCAA Division I wrestler, which is very highly esteemed wrestler, freestyle wrestling pedigree in the United States. The only way this is going to come into effect in the fight, and what he needs to rely on in the fight at certain times, is takedown defense. He has to prevent all of Khabib's takedowns, and if he does get taken down, he's going to need to get back up as soon as possible. And that's a big question in this fight, is if Khabib does take Justin Gaethje down, how long is he going to keep him there, and how much damage is he going to inflict? Khabib definitely has underrated striking. He has that sort of like eagle punch that's very like unorthodox and catches people off guard. And some people have criticized this punch, but I mean, if a technique works and it lands and it does damage, then it works. So I mean, if it's bad technique, it doesn't really matter, because if something works, and Dan Hardy has said this before as well, is that if something works, then you can't really criticize this strike. So it's really hard to judge this fight, because we haven't seen Justin use almost any of his wrestling, which is so weird given his wrestling pedigree. He hasn't fought any wrestlers in the UFC, let alone a very highly skilled wrestler in Khabib Nurmagomedov. And I think, and I hope, this is going to be an all-out war. There's no question that Khabib will take Justin down. We're just going to have to see how long it takes for him to get back up, if it gasses him. And we know both guys can go 5 rounds, but can Justin do it with all the wrestling involved? We're going to have to see. The other thing I want to mention is that, and I mentioned this before for Islam, is that Khabib's father passed away. We have yet to see how this will affect his fighting. He hasn't fought since then. His last fight was last year against Dustin Poirier, which he won convincingly in. I feel like, if anything, it might make him better, but you never know how someone will react to such a tragic event like this. So either way, I have no idea how this fight is going to go down. Khabib is undefeated, but will Justin be the one that end that streak? We're gonna have to see on Saturday. So I predict, and my like for the guy is sort of influencing me on this, but I do think there's something different in Gaethje that is gonna help him win this fight, and I think he's gonna win via 5-round unanimous decision. I think we're going to see a new and improved Gaethje like we have seen in all of his new fights. He evolves in each fight, and he's going to get better on this one. We're going to see him use his wrestling for once, and he's going to use it to keep the fight standing, and he's going to be able to devise and execute a game plan with the help of Trevor Whitman. I think they're going to have a good game plan and the rating Khabib. Let me know what you guys think of my predictions. Who do you predict to win on Saturday night at UFC Fight Island? If you guys like this video, please subscribe down below, hit the like button, and I will see you soon. Enjoy the fights. Peace. When they scrapping, blast and watch them black, a notorious Biggie killer, affiliation with death row. Niggas get they